Well, yesterday, a congressman introduced 7 articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump as he approaches his 100th day in office. In a statement, Democratic Representative Sri Thanedar from Michigan accused Trump of violating the Constitution. He cited the president's refusal to comply with a Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of Kilmar Obrego Garcia to the U.S. Now, Thanedar also accused of Trump of abusing trade powers, international aggression, bribery, corruption, tyranny, and violating First Amendment rights, among other charges. The statement goes on to say, quote, his unlawful actions have subverted the justice system, violated the separation of powers, and placed personal power and self-interest above public service. We cannot wait for more damage to be done. Congress must act.
A Democratic congressman from Michigan has now introduced new articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump, and the timing could not be more explosive. Representative Sri Thanedar says Trump has repeatedly shown that he is unfit to remain in office and now represents a clear and immediate threat to the Constitution. The accusations reportedly include unlawful deportations, tariff decisions, and the dismantling of federal agencies through DOJ. But what makes this moment even more intense is what was allegedly happening at the exact same time. While House Democrats were pushing impeachment forward, members of Trump's own cabinet were reportedly holding private discussions about whether the 25th Amendment should be used to remove him from office. In other words, Trump is now facing pressure from Congress while also dealing with alleged concerns from inside his own administration. Now let's see the part where Democrats call this a constitutional crisis.
I believe it is up to every member of this institution, Republican or Democrat, to make a clear and unambiguous statement that any attempt by this president to remove Special Counsel Mueller from his position or to pardon key witnesses in any effort to shield them from accountability or shut down the investigation would be a gross abuse of power and a flagrant violation of executive branch responsibilities and authorities. Firing Mr. Mueller or any other of the top brass involved in this investigation would not only call into question this administration's commitment to the truth, but also to our most basic concept, rule of law. It also has the potential to provoke a constitutional crisis.
The next part explains why Democrats are treating this as a brand new constitutional crisis instead of simply revisiting past impeachment fights. This is not the same impeachment story from 2019 or 2021. This is not about Ukraine, and it is not just another replay of January 6th. These are fresh allegations tied to recent actions, and the language being used is extremely severe. The articles reportedly accuse Trump of carrying out a treasonous war against the United States and committing systemic violations of constitutional rights. That means Democrats are not focusing on one isolated incident. They are arguing that Trump's conduct reflects a wider pattern of abuse, a repeated misuse of presidential authority, and a direct danger to constitutional government itself. This next clip shows the executive order triggering legal alarm.
The US president is expected to sign an executive order declaring left-wing movement Antifa a terrorist organisation. The Trump administration is pledging to crack down on left-wing groups fueling political violence in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death.
For those in the room who don't believe this is a serious threat to American safety and our national security, but this administration knows that it is. That's why the president will be signing this order. And we will also be, most importantly, looking at who is funding Antifa and who is funding these other violent left-wing groups that we've seen perpetuate so much crime and mayhem across our country.
One of the biggest triggers is an executive order that legal experts warn could turn presidential power into a dangerous political weapon. Two recent actions appear to have pushed the situation into a much more serious phase. The first was Trump's executive order declaring Antifa a terrorist organization. To many of his supporters, that may sound like a tough law and order move, but legal experts are raising a major constitutional warning. A president does not have unlimited authority to unilaterally label a domestic political movement or organization as terrorist without following established legal procedures and standards. Terrorist designations come with enormous consequences. They can justify surveillance, frozen assets, arrests, and other powerful government actions. That is why legal processes exist. If a president can simply label political opponents as terrorists through executive order, then that power can quickly become a political weapon. Here is where the story becomes even more explosive.
There's no doubt that It's a fair judgment. It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. I was fired in some way to change, or the endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted. That is a very big deal, and not just because it involves me. The nature of the FBI and the nature of its work requires that it not be the subject of political consideration.
The second trigger goes even deeper because it points directly to the Justice Department and the possibility of political retaliation. Trump reportedly fired a federal prosecutor after that prosecutor refused to launch investigations into Trump's political opponents. If that report is accurate, it would represent one of the clearest examples of abuse of power imaginable. A prosecutor's role is to enforce the law based on evidence, not to serve as a president's personal political tool. If a prosecutor was pressured to go after political enemies and then fired for refusing, that raises major concerns about retaliation, obstruction, and the misuse of the Justice Department. That type of accusation strikes directly at the heart of whether the president is faithfully carrying out the law or using the system for personal political power. Let's look at the watchdog groups building the bigger case.
Tonight, in a 60-page legal brief summarizing their case, House Democrats say President Trump abandoned his oath to faithfully execute the laws and betrayed his public trust.
President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States.
This is where separate accusations begin turning into one much larger impeachment case. Legal advocacy groups have reportedly been tracking these concerns for months, but recent developments appear to have created a new level of urgency. Free Speech for People has reportedly outlined 25 separate grounds for impeachment, with the latest concerns connected to the Antifa executive order and the alleged firing of the prosecutor. That matters because this argument is no longer only coming from partisan political critics. It is also being made by legal experts, former prosecutors, and constitutional watchdogs who believe these actions may have crossed a line that cannot be ignored. Now watch how the 25th Amendment enters the story.
Sources tell CBS News that members of President Trump's own cabinet are considering invoking the 25th Amendment. The discussions have been ongoing, and it's unclear at this point if there will be enough support to result in President Trump's removal. Several Democratic lawmakers, including Sacramento Congresswoman Doris Matsui, have called on Vice President Pence to begin that process.
Separate from the 25th Amendment, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar says she is drawing up new articles of impeachment against the president. She tweeted, "We can't allow him to remain in office."
What makes this moment truly extraordinary is that Congress may not be the only place where removal is being discussed. The impeachment story is only one side of the larger crisis. The other side involves the reported discussions about the 25th Amendment taking place inside Trump's own administration. The 25th Amendment allows the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare that a president is unable to carry out the responsibilities of the office. It was originally designed for situations involving stroke, coma, severe illness, or genuine incapacity. It has never been used against a president who opposed it. That is exactly why even discussing it in this context is so extraordinary. This is where the legal debate gets dangerous. The legal conversation now moves into territory the United States has never fully tested before. The question being debated is whether being unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office refers only to physical or medical incapacity, or whether it could also apply to a president whose behavior has become so reckless, erratic, or constitutionally dangerous that he is no longer properly functioning in the role. Some legal experts believe the amendment should apply only to medical incapacity. Others argue that if a president is systematically violating the Constitution, then he may be functionally unable to uphold the office. This is completely uncharted territory. For anyone inside Trump's cabinet, even discussing this option would be politically explosive. Now see why cabinet members face enormous risk. The political cost of invoking the 25th Amendment would be massive. Any cabinet member who supported such a move would almost certainly be labeled a traitor by Trump's supporters. Their political future could be destroyed overnight. That is why the fact that anyone inside the administration is reportedly even discussing it is so significant. It suggests that some individuals close to Trump may believe the situation has become unstable enough that normal constitutional safeguards may no longer be sufficient. The midterm timeline is making everything feel even more urgent. The country is now less than a year away from the 2026 midterms, and Democrats know that if they are going to act, their window may be shrinking. If Republicans gain more control in Congress, impeachment could become impossible. This part explains whether impeachment can actually remove Trump. At the same time, Trump's actions are being viewed as increasingly aggressive. The Antifa designation and the alleged firing of the prosecutor are not being seen as isolated moments. They are being treated as part of a much larger pattern involving expanded presidential authority, political retaliation, and constitutional boundary testing. That brings the central question into focus. Can either path actually remove Trump from office? The practical reality is that impeachment alone may not be enough. The House can impeach with a simple majority, and if Democrats hold the numbers, they may be able to pass the articles. But actual removal requires conviction in the Senate by a 2/3 vote. That means 67 senators. Democrats would need a large number of Republicans to join them, which remains unlikely unless public pressure becomes overwhelming or much more damaging evidence emerges. Trump still maintains a strong grip on the Republican Party, and many Republican senators know that voting to convict him could effectively end their careers. Finally, this part shows the constitutional showdown that could define Trump's presidency. Even if impeachment fails in the Senate, it would still have major significance. Impeachment creates a permanent historical record. It forces hearings. It places evidence in front of the public. It forces Republicans to publicly defend Trump's actions. And if Trump were impeached again, he would become the only president in American history to be impeached 3 times. That fact alone would shape his legacy and dominate political discussion heading into the midterms. The 25th Amendment path would be much faster, but also far more dangerous. If the vice president and a majority of the cabinet declared Trump unable to serve, the vice president would immediately become acting president. Trump could challenge that move, but during that battle, he would be out of power unless Congress restored him. That is why the 25th Amendment is potentially more immediate than impeachment. But without the vice president's participation, the entire process collapses instantly. It also raises major precedent concerns. If used too broadly, future administrations could attempt to remove presidents over political disagreements instead of genuine incapacity. So what is the most likely outcome? The impeachment articles may move forward in the House. Hearings may begin. The country could enter another intense impeachment battle. The House could vote to impeach, but the Senate would almost certainly remain the biggest obstacle. Unless Republicans break ranks in major numbers, removal through impeachment remains unlikely. The 25th Amendment conversations may also disappear if cabinet members decide the political risk is simply too great and the legal foundation is too uncertain. But the fact that both conversations are happening at the same time is the true story here. Congressional impeachment and possible cabinet-level removal discussions show that Trump's presidency is entering a dangerous constitutional moment. This is not simply partisan political noise. It is a direct test of whether America's constitutional checks and balances can still function when a president is accused of pushing far beyond accepted constitutional limits. It raises one enormous question. Can the system still hold a president accountable, or has the presidency become too powerful and too protected by party loyalty? The coming weeks could become historic. More evidence may surface. More cabinet officials may reportedly leak concerns. Republicans may remain loyal, or some may finally break away. Democrats may continue pushing forward, or the effort could stall completely. But one thing already appears clear. Trump is facing one of the most serious political and constitutional crises of his presidency. And whatever happens next could shape how presidential power is understood for generations.